So now we switch to Danielle Ingram, another candidate for election. And the paper said, and I quote, she'd like to see the ownership issue resolved on the site so that it can get started generating property taxes. Do universities pay taxes?
Well, Danielle also said if it's granted to the university, it will likewise not produce needed tax money, and we need that money. Expropriation in this case was for a public purpose. You're never going to get tax money. The only way you get tax money is to give it back to me. Then it's back in private hands. Whether I develop it, or I have somebody else develop it, or in agreement with the city, we all have somebody else develop it. The only way that happens is to go through me. Or they go to the court and say, even though we took all of this land from the Ryans, didn't really pay them what they think is fair, haven't done anything for 6 years, we want you to let us keep it and make money off of it while he sits there wanting to get his money back. I don't think that's going to happen. I think what's going to happen is everybody's going to sit down and make some common sense decisions. And we're going to find a way to work together to get the site developed, get it making tax money, but we're going to do it with everybody's agreement, not with just a couple of people. I should say and point out that legally, and this is in an affidavit by the city signed by Ron Shaw, they said that the specific reason they took our lands that we agreed to was for the University of Waterloo Stratford Institute. Now this is important. There's a lot of confusion over this word institute, who owns what. What we do know is the institute has closed its doors or is closing its doors. A lot of people ask me, does that mean that the building that's sitting there right now that's a university is closing its doors? All I know for sure is when I went down and I went to the university, they've agreed publicly that they've given part of that space over to the Accelerator Center, which is not the university. Prior to that, I understood that they gave free rent to the institute. I have emails from the university saying we have nothing to do with the institute. But I didn't get those emails until after they had my land. So my position is very straightforward. If you took it for the institute and you're closing the institute, then the reason you took my land is gone. That triggers Section 41, that opens up the door again. Now, what Danielle may not be aware of, and everyone here needs to know, the funding for this institute started in 2007. The taxpayer was first obligated to pay up to $100,000 to investigate bringing the University Institute to town. Then they became obligated to provide the land for free, however many acres it is. Then there was 10 million plus, they had to find another 5. Now all of this is documented by the university and by the city in some of the minutes, and I'll take the trouble to go through my files and upload documents that show that they agree with what I'm saying. Then there was the servicing. You know, when they put the university building there, they had to change around. And then there was the soil removal. You'll recall that there was a lot of soil piled. About a quarter of that was taken to the dump and used for soil cover, or cover soil at the time. The balance was just removed a week or so ago. The federal government put in $5 million. The Ontario Ministry of Research and Innovation put up $10 million. OpenText put up $10 million, $1 million in cash, the rest in kind. They had provided some information, programs, etc., that were worth a lot of money. The 8 acres was promised, but only 1.3 acres was given. So if the university's right, it's $1 million an acre, and they get 8, and you only give them 1.3, well, then you know what the value is. But the institute's dissolved now. So where does the university come in? We're all wondering why it sits in a small building up in the corner. If you go to the land registry office, the plan that was registered includes an approved development plan for the university with an existing approved expansion on the 1.3 acres. It doesn't include additional lands yet. we'll talk about this perhaps a little bit later, because it's going to take some time to try and explain how you go from a Waterloo Institute, or the University of Waterloo Institute, to, no, there's a Stratford Institute, and we're a university, and we were going to work together, but now we're not doing anything, and the institute's gone. Where's the accounting? We're trying to find that right now. When I say we, I mean Wendy and I. We want to know where the $50 million went. We can see the building, it cost 12. I can figure that there was about $1 million in the servicing and maybe $500,000 in moving the soil around. But all those federal monies, I've seen the correspondence from the university, that went to the institute that has closed its doors, unless there's 2 institutes. So I could use some help trying to find out that information.
Thank you. Switching to Brad Beatty. A quote, "Market Square is the city's #1 unfunded project."
Well, without being coy, the expropriation is. My claim's for $79 million plus interest. We're guaranteed 6% from the day they took the land. We have the right to take it behind that date, because the Expropriation Act says you pay interest from the day I lost use of the site. Our claim says we lost use of the site in 1997 with this campaign of the city started. And it's interesting to note that that campaign started with the city passing a report that says Stratford and beyond. And that report said we want to bring a university to town, and that's this document. You may have been at the opening of the university when Mayor Madison said bringing the university to town started in 1997 when he approved this. So we've taken our interest date back to then. Whether the OMB gives us that or not, I don't know. But it's a fair argument. Now, I've had a lot of people say that the number 79 million seems out of this world. That number's broken down. Read the claim. The documents are there to support it. But even if I were to agree with everybody tomorrow that I would only get half of that, 6% interest, brings it right back up to the 79 million anyway, because we're 6 years later, and obviously we're not going to settle this anytime soon if the council of the day continues in this way. That's why the citizens need to step up to the plate and realize this is your bill, not theirs. They obligated you to it, but you don't have to make it worse.
And that slides right into Dave Gaffney's quote, "Taxpayers should not be made to pay for whatever's done to the site."
Well, as I said, the council obligated you to already. So what you need is a council in there that has an open mind and doesn't mind sitting down talking with the Ryans and the citizens at the same time. And this is important. Far too long, council, staff, Dan Madison have had their way with controlling the information flow. If we're all sitting in the same room at the same time, we hear what everybody else has got to say, that comes to an end.
And George Brown, quote, "He'd certainly vote against any," oh, it's a quote from the newspaper, "He'd certainly vote against any more tax money on it. Enough is enough," he added.
Well, George Brown is the one that voted for the expropriation. He's approving the legal bills. He's keeping it in court and the OMB. So if he were really telling it right, he'd be the first one sitting in front of me saying, "Lawrence, we have to talk this up." I can say with candor that Mr. Brown does not appreciate me being in a room. So I don't know how he's ever going to get the matter resolved if he can't stand the sight of it.
And another comment from Kathy Vasilakis. I pronounced it correctly. Quote, "Out of Stratford's remaining brownfield developments, this Cooper site is the biggest and baddest."
I had the pleasure of speaking with Kathy, and she explained that her concern was lead paint. And I advised her that the lead paint issue was resolved as to how it gets dealt with the Ministry of the Environment years ago. There was a study done in 1996 that confirmed there was lead paint on the steel, and it's to be removed properly. And there's lead paint in lots of buildings that's removed on a regular basis. The cost is minimal. But what's interesting, in 2010, September, when the city demolished part of the Cooper site, they dealt with designated substances, and that covered the lead paint as well, so there's no further issue there. But when you're talking about the biggest and baddest brownfield, I had thought that what she might be meaning is that there's still a $20 million environmental problem on the site. On October the 1st, 2014, just a week ago, the city of Stratford filed a risk assessment pre-submission form. Now, 6 years ago, one of the documents I put on the table over there is I had XCG, my environmental consultant, do up a report. It's about 105 pages long. And at the end of it, he had reviewed the some 40-some reports at that time and said, and he had worked for me on the site at the time of the fire. So he said you can risk assess the site and the maximum damage would be approximately $1 million. That's allowing for $500,000 to remove some soil that might have to be removed, but those two portions of the soil, one was sitting on the Downey Street parking lot, which is the city's, but the contamination slipped over to our side, and the other came from the Festival Hydro site. So what happened now is they filed the pre-submission form, so they're going to risk assess. So all that work we did, I would suggest that the cost was well over $1 million for the city to drill additional holes and do additional reports was a waste. They could have just agreed with us and saved everybody that money. Now, in addition, to cover off some of those costs, the city went to the Green Municipal Fund, and they told them we're going to spend $750,000 doing some additional environmental work. They got approved, and they said, we'll put up half, you put up half. So they got half. But what they told them in this submission form, which I'll put up on the site as well, is every step of the way we're going to involve the public. They didn't do that. In the risk assessment pre-submission form, it specifically checks off the box, there will be no public consultation. So this is about it. You'll see it now because I'm bringing it to you. But this paperwork was prepared before the all candidates meeting, so he could have, and I say he, I mean Mayor Matheson, could have told everybody, especially Kathy, it's not such a big bad site anymore. We can risk assess it, just like Mr. Ryan said 6 years ago. And now, the way this pre-submission form is, we've reviewed it, it would appear that they're not planning on removing any additional soil, and therefore, you can risk assess for $500,000. So I'm sure at the end of the day, they'll come up with another number or whatever, but that's what we'll likely be arguing about at the OMB. But it's not such a big bad site.
For those of us who are not tuned in on this too much, could you just take a second to explain what risk assessment is?
Yes. If you know there's something in the ground or on the site that if you breathed it in or swallowed it or touched it and it would cause you harm, your first instinct is to remove it. But with industrial sites, they assess the risk. So in this submission form that the city filed, they say no one's at risk, but possibly children, and we can address that. And the city's commented on this before. You put down some new topsoil. Instead of 6 inches, you put down 12 inches. You put down a bit of concrete where your walkways are, so that a child can't dig it up with a shovel and start eating it. So you assess the risk, and you find a way to ensure that it can't cause any problem, and then it's encapsulated such that you no longer have to remove it.
And that would be less expensive than digging it all out?
Certainly.
Taking all those things, okay.